rock and roll pursuits last week, if you missed any of the rock and roll interviews with, I don't know, Billy Joel or John Bon Jovi or David Bowie, Meatloaf, any of those guys, it's all in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault there for you 24 hours a day. They're living there these days, and you can check them out, and we'll be adding more to it for the next time that we do that. But we're back onto the playing field right now, and the first place Baltimore Orioles are headed to New York to take on the Yankees. You know, Singleton loves the Orioles so much, he's just taking a series off and hanging out here in Baltimore where he belongs. We welcome the Orioles legend, and I've always wanted to say this on the radio. Come on, Singleton, put it in the bullpen in honor of Wild Bill Hagee. Ken, how you been, man? I saw that your golf tournament did well a couple weeks ago up at Hunt Valley, and you always spend time here, but you probably spend as much on the Amtrak train as anybody, right?
Well, that's very true. That's usually how I get up to New York and back. In fact, I've been doing that for a long time, and it's funny that you mention that because on my way up towards New York, they asked me, what do you think the Yankees are going to do? And on the way back from New York, they asked me, what do you think the Orioles are going to do? So it's very interesting trip, to say the least. Just about every single time that happens.
Hey, man, I'm going to be asking you the same thing right now. So the very rarefied air. I've been doing this 25 years now, Ken. This is only the third time the Orioles have been in first place after the All-Star break in 25 years on radio here. The Yankees or the Red Sox are usually holding that rarefied air. This is really weird. I mean, I love saying the first place Orioles going to Yankee Stadium in July, and this is really a week where the Yankees could get themselves buried. The Orioles could be a big part of, burying them into this, 2 weeks from now, wanting to deal players off. And I guess this fire sale thing with the Yankees is something you're unaccustomed to. You've been 2 decades on the beat up there, and this is a time I think a lot of Yankees fans, as well as everybody around the organization, talking about what they're going to do.
Yeah, a couple of things are very interesting in this series. Number one, this is after the All-Star break. This is the first time the Orioles have been to New York. It's hard to believe. They haven't played a series at Yankee Stadium yet this year, so that means they're going to spend a lot of time in New York in the next 3 months here. Also, with the Yankees kind of struggling at this point, you're right about the fact that there might be a different-looking team within the next 2 weeks or so at the trade deadline. So it could be interesting. Names like Beltran and Chapman have been floating around. And even some of the other Yankees, like Brett Gardner and Brian McCann, their names are floating out there. Andrew Miller, of course, people are interested in him. The teams are in contention looking for a bullpen help. So there could be some changes within the Yankees. They just haven't gotten it together this year, Nestor. They just, for some reason, they can't have any consistency. Joe Girardi mentions we haven't been able to go 6 out of 8 or 7 out of 10. Somebody always throws a clunker of a start in there, and it kind of sets them back. So I think their longest winning streak this year is 5, and their longest losing streak this year is about 5. So they've just kind of been 50-50 all season long.
Well, we've, I guess in many, many years wonder what it would look like to have fire sales. Certainly the Orioles have traded away and now are in a position that they need pitching and might not have any sort of depth to give away to get any pitching, even if it was an Evaldi or a Nova or some of these guys that maybe the Yankees would deal off the side. The question is, what would their value even be to other teams? I mean, obvious value in Beltran, obvious value in Chapman, among some other guys that if they're going to sell off, why would they just sell a bunch of it off instead of just making a trade or two here around the deadline?
I think that's the preference of Brian Cashman, the GM. Of course, he has to get the approval from Hal Steinbrenner to do that. And up to this point, it appears that the ownership doesn't want to break up the team altogether. Now, they might be willing to trade a guy or two, but they're not just going to blow it up. I think what happens is in New York, that even if they are in a rebuilding mode, they're not going to admit it. They're not going to say we're rebuilding. They aren't going to be willing to do what the Red Sox did and suffer in last place for a couple of years. And now the Red Sox are right in the thick of it because they've got some great young players on their team. The Yankees would like to be in the Red Sox mode now with some young players like Bogarts, who's a tremendous shortstop, Mookie Betts, Jackie Bradley Jr., all these players. They're 26 or younger, and they're among the best players in the league. Look at the Chicago Cubs. I think like 7 of their 8 starters are 26 years old and younger. You don't see many teams like that around baseball. But so the Cubbies are going to be good for a long time, and I think the Red Sox will be too.
Ken Singleton, the Orioles legend and Baltimorean. He still lives here, even though he does those Yankees games up on the Yes Network. Taking this series off, Singy, right? I mean, middle of July, 95 degrees. Good day to take a couple days off. I know you'll get back up there this weekend, but for the Yankees and where they are right now and the players that they have, I look at Teixeira, I look at A-Rod, you say, well, these are the reasons that the Orioles didn't want to spend that much money on Chris Davis.
Yeah.
The last couple of years of all of these deals, there's no such thing as a good deal in year 6, 7, or 8 of some of these guys' contracts, right?
Yeah, it's getting to be that way, and unfortunately, they got what they wanted right out of the box with Teixeira and Sabathia. They won the World Series the first year that they were there, but you get to the point now. Teixeira has had a lot of injuries the last couple of years. A-Rod is certainly not the player that he was. Last year, these two guys, Teixeira and A-Rod, had 64 home runs. This year, at this point, they've got about 15. So they're not producing as they did last year. I think what's happening to the Yankees this year, Nestor, is what people thought was going to happen to them last year. Now, it didn't, and this year they might be paying the price. They're not used to being – this is the first time since 1995 they've been below 500 after the All-Star break. So they've got some work to do if they want to get back into this. And I will say this, they play a lot of games against the American League East teams, including the Orioles. The Yankees have a lot of home games in the second half as well. So we'll see what happens.
For Cashman to have never been in this position to deal off is for might be's, I don't even think there's no track record at all for this as to how he would go about this, what kind of bids he would take on Beltran or any of or Chapman, any of these players. Obviously, this would be a nice look for them to go into spring training with, 5, 6, 8 new prospects next March. If that was the way, the Yankees have never been able to do that. I could see why Cashman, who's been around World Series, got a pocket full of rings and all that stuff, that this would be appealing to him at this point for one time, one chance to say, let me go raid somebody else's A and AA ball teams and see what we could put together here in 18 and 19. I mean, let's be honest, the Orioles, it's been a nice run for them, but if the Davis deal, or excuse me, the Davis deal will be part of that as well, but really this is about Adam Jones and Tillman from many, many years ago maturing, that's been a big, big part of the last 5 years of success, was dealing at the trading deadlines and actually getting some quality prospects instead of suspects.
Yeah, you got to trust your scouts to know the other organizations. I'm sure Cashman has been well advised as to who has what, just about throughout the Major League Baseball, who has the best organizations, who are the good matches for them, what kind of prospects they're looking for. Mostly teams, of course, are looking for pitchers. If he decides to do this, and I mean not just the Beltrans and the Chapmans, but decides to go all the way, they're going to get a boatload of younger players, rebuild their organization. Although they have 3 or 4 very good prospects in the Yankee organization who are ranked in the top 100 by Baseball America. I don't know if you heard of Aaron Judge, but he's an outfielder. Unfortunately for him, he hurt his knee about a week or so ago, and he's not going to play for the next 3 weeks. I felt he was very close to coming up to the Major League because he was the International League Player of the Month in June. I think he had 11 home runs in June and drove in a boatload of runs, but he hurt his knee, and he's out for a while. I thought he was very, very close to coming up, but that's not going to happen for a while.
Well, it's a different thing there when you have millions of dollars in sponsorships and skyboxes and the allure of the Yankees. The throwing in the white towel is just not the way the Yankees do things. And I would think that they're, at the business level with what they charge for those tickets and the premium prices. I've been to 20 games in the new ballpark up there singing. I don't think I've ever spent more than $10 on a ticket. Swear to God. I mean, it's not hard to get a Yankees ticket even when they were good. I don't know how much of that money or the fear for Steinbrenner, for Levine, that hey, the Mets were in the World Series last year. We can't go into the tank here, not on the fans, but really on the corporate money that is so vital to keeping the Yankees, where they are and paying these guys, right?
Yeah, that's true. But it's also true with a lot of other teams because you have the sponsorships that you see, on the walls in the and on the scoreboards around Major League Baseball. And all of them want to be associated with a winning team. They all do. And this is with every team in Major League Baseball. When the season starts, they're hoping that this is the year for our team. And so it's not going to work out for everybody. So, but the Yankees, as you said, have been fortunate over the years. I've been there 21 years. Every year we've had a winning record. I think they've got a winning record streak of 23 consecutive years now going. So that's pretty darn good. That's a lot of winning baseball. Of course, a lot of those years they had Jeter and Mariano and those type of guys. They're not there anymore. So they're going to have to try and find another core four, if you will, to take the place of those guys and create a winning tradition for a period of time.
As you pointed out, the Orioles haven't made their trip up to the Bronx, but, I know you spent so much time here in Baltimore. I know you got an orange heart somewhere. You peel back all those pinstripes of yours and all those 21 years up there. This has been a nice little run for the Orioles, but it is really bizarre that their pitching stinks the way it does. Their organization, at a depth level, would not have the kind of firepower to deal with the Cashmans, to bring in the pitchers that they would like to bring in. And I know you, like everyone else, would believe that pitching wins in the big league, but defense, they hit the cover off the ball, and the back end of the bullpen has been fantastic. But boy, do they have to figure out this rotation if they want to be a first-place team. If you give me $1 right now on who's going to win the division, I'd have to bet it on the Red Sox right now, Ken.
Yeah, well, the Red Sox are pretty darn good. They've got some injuries they're dealing with right now. At the beginning of the year, I picked Toronto. And they can hit. I mean, they can really hit the ball. They're like the Orioles. They can really hit. And a lot depends, like the Orioles, on their pitching. I don't think their bullpen is as good as the Orioles. But for some reason, I just think that they are the team that almost got to the World Series last year. And a lot of times that will make you very tough the next year. So that's why I picked them. I think you're right about the Orioles. They do need another pitcher, another starter somewhere. I don't know how they're going to get it. Dan Duquette is pretty resourceful. He knows what he's doing. So maybe there's somebody out there. I'm not saying it's going to be a number one pitcher. You're not coming up with Chris Sale. So I think that they're going to have to try and get somebody somewhere. One thing about the Orioles, you mentioned their starters haven't been that successful, but they can really hit. You can win games 8-6, and they've been doing it. It's the ones when you get to the playoffs. It's hard to score 8 runs off a playoff team because their pitchers are having a good year. And when you get to the playoffs, and if you're depending on just one starter, it's not going to get it. It's just not going to happen. So they're going to have to go out and find a pitcher somewhere.
Our dear friend and one of our favorites, number 29 on your roster, number 1 in your hearts. He is Ken Singleton joining us here. Orioles taking on the Yankees. The first place Baltimore's. Ken, I got to say that as much as I can. While it's still going on up to Yankee Stadium. Manny Machado and Jonathan Scope, man, I go back to your days in the big leagues when Trammell and Whitaker came up through the middle. I think in the end, Machado will wind up at shortstop. The two of them, this is the year the blossoming has really happened. And despite swinging at a few pitches over his head, with Scope, he's hitting doubles, he's hitting for average, he's had better pitch selection, and I think Machado might be emerging as one of the best players in Major League Baseball. This is really a tribute to the Orioles system at this point because since you left, for crying out loud, there's been Ripken and Messina and very little else that's come through the organization as organizational guys. This is sort of a new development, and Mr. Angelos going to have to reach into his pocket and pay these guys, but this is a golden era, again, of Oriole baseball going on right now. I don't know if it's being received as such here locally like it was back in 79 and 83 in your era where I felt like it was on the tip of everyone's tongue. Maybe that's baseball today. Maybe the Ravens with training camp next week and it's a different era. But watching Machado and Scope play day to day, been a long time, man, since I've seen anything from the under 25 set like this year.
Yeah, these guys are some of the best players in baseball. We knew that about Manny for the last few years. I mean, he's been in a multiple All-Star, but Scope, to me, is starting to come into his own. He's one of the better defensive second basemen in the league. And one thing I look at, the last few years, his on-base percentage has been less than 30% because he's hacking at everything. But his on-base percentage has gone up this year. In other words, he's getting more selective. He's going to hit close to 25 home runs. That's pretty good production from a second baseman. His RBIs will be up somewhere near 100. And once again, that's very good production for a second baseman, a middle infielder. He's one of the better second basemen in the league. You're talking guys like Altuve. You're talking about Cano. Dustin Pedroia is still a factor with the Boston Red Sox. And you got Scope. You can lump him in there with those three others, and you can take your pick, and you're going to be okay at your second base position. I think Cano and Pedroia are a little bit older, but so that if you want a younger type guy, maybe you go with Altuve or Scope at second base in the American League.
Ken Singleton joining us here, talking all things baseball, Orioles, Yankees. I want to throw the Red Sox back in here for a minute because they went out in the market last week and pulled the trigger on a left-handed pitcher. I'm not shocked by that, but I would say for the Red Sox and the Blue Jays, and I don't want to say the Orioles, it's not urgent for the Orioles to win this year, but they're going to come back next year with Davis and Machado and Scope and a whole bunch of other players. Boy, the Red Sox go lose Ortiz. Obviously, the Blue Jays are going to have some losses in the. I think there's some urgency for those franchises that doesn't exist right this minute for the Orioles, and especially not when they're sitting in first place.
Yeah, I think you could say that Bautista probably won't be back with the Blue Jays next year. I mean, his contract demands at this point are kind of off the charts for a guy his age, and I don't see the Blue Jays coming up with $25 million a year for him. So, maybe he's gone, or maybe they, negotiate as the season goes along, and eventually they agree on a 2 or 3 year extension. But it's not going to be much more than that. So, each team is going to have their issues at the season's end. The A-Rod, if he continues to struggle in the second half, he's got one more year that the Yankees decide to keep him and pay him over $20 million. And because this production thing with him has not been just this year. It went back to last August. August and September, he struggled. And the first part of the year, he was great.
Yeah,
but from that point on, he hasn't played all that well.
Of all the things the Orioles did in the offseason, the Trumbo thing felt like sort of an insurance policy for Davis. And then they go give Davis all this money, and Trumbo has out-Davis or out-Trumboed him at this point. Look, you've seen Trumbo play for almost a decade now. And I know you had good years, bad years, ups, downs, especially in the power department. What we've seen from him this year, it really is a wild game of adjustments, isn't it? That you saw that this guy had it in him. Last couple of years, not so much. He's really reinvigorated his career here at Camden Yards, and certainly being in a lineup with a whole bunch of other guys who can hit the ball has helped him as well.
Yeah, that you surround yourselves with there's no rest stops. Let's put it this way in the Oriole lineup. I would say that Trumbo has had some very good years, particularly when he first came up with the Angels. And I complimented Dan Duquette on this deal that he made. Here's a guy who, at the time, looked like he was going to hit 30 home runs and drive in 100. Now it looks like he's going to drive in 40-plus and drive in 100-plus. So to make a trade like that, not to disparage Steve Clevenger. I mean, he's a backup catcher, but
Baltimore guy.
You got a guy who's an all-star and might be one of the guys on the postseason all-star team. Once the season's over, he might be an American League all-star again. I think that Trumbo. I talked to Dan about it, and he said that he knew that when Jerry DiPoto was the general manager of the Angels, he traded Trumbo. And while Jerry DiPoto is now the manager of the Seattle Mariners, he thought that he would trade him again. And he was right. He made the deal, and it worked out. So Seattle was looking for a catcher, a backup catcher, and they got one. And the Orioles got themselves an all-star and a participant in the home run derby who kind of held his own. It's hard to do when you think it. That's a heck of a deal.
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, in Nelson Cruz 2 years ago, it's a difference between being a first-place team or not being a first-place team if they didn't pull the trigger on that. Singy, last thing for you on Dylan Bundy and his start on Sunday and arm issues and resting guy. And I've sat here all week talking about all the prospects in the history of Oriole baseball back in your era, the Drungo Haywoods and the Jim Fullers and the Ken Gerhardts and all these guys that come through. Dylan Bundy's a guy it's been on the tip of every Oriole fan's tongue for 5 years. He finally pitched more than a third of an inning this year. Gets into the bullpen. Now they're trying to rush him into the rotation. I know they're trying to baby him because they need him next year, but they kind of sort of need him now, and they put him in that role on Sunday. He just doesn't look like he's ready to be an 80, 90, 100-pitch guy right now. And, only these pitchers know what their shoulders are like after these surgeries. But I understand what they're trying to do, but they have a need for him right now. It is a little bit of a conundrum for the front office right now.
Yeah, it might be. I didn't actually see his game, but I did see the numbers, and there might have been something there. You know, he's got good stuff. He's been pretty good out of the bullpen. This is the way that pitchers used to earn their way to spot starts, and if they pitch well in those spot starts, then they'd get another one. This is how pitchers came out of the bullpen. Dennis Martinez started in the bullpen. Mike Flanagan started in the bullpen. I'm not so sure if Jim Palmer did because I wasn't there yet. But I know that the other two did. And Dennis Martinez was primarily out of bullpens. So you pitch well out of the pen, you get a spot start, you pitch well, Earl would reward you by giving you another start pretty soon thereafter. And these guys eventually earned their way into the rotation, and they all became very, very good pitchers with the Baltimore Orioles.
Hey, by the way, I looked up 1965, a little before your time and mine. Palmer did have 19 appearances out of the bullpen in 65.
Yeah, all right. You know that you earn your way, you know, and he earned his way and eventually became the best pitcher the Orioles ever had.
Absolutely. Hey, man, I always appreciate the time for you. Tell me about your celebrity golf tour. I know we're 48, 49 weeks away, and you do it for cool kids and all that stuff, but I know it's important to you, and I know it's your local, and I know a lot of local people support it, so I certainly want to give a nod. Let's talk about it a little bit.
Well, thank you, Nestor, for asking. We had it a few weeks ago, the last weekend in June, and we had it at Hunt Valley Golf Course. We also had a pairings party at the Boomy Temple. We had a crab feast over at the Towson Marriott. All these people are sponsors of ours. The tournament was sold out again. A lot of my former teammates show up. You name one, they were there. We have each other's back, just like we did, half a life ago. And it's a lot of fun.
Well, it's probably just fun getting together with your buddies and playing some golf as well, right?
Yeah, but, the sponsorship that we have, we had two title sponsors this year, First National Bank and DAP Incorporated. Their support was just tremendous. The Yes Network is involved. They support, along with various other corporations and companies, and we really appreciate all their help. As I said, we were sold out again this year. The tournament gets bigger and bigger every year. My teammates come from all over the country. Doug DeCinces came this year for the first time. Eddie Murray was there once again. Dennis Martinez came up from Miami. There's just guys come from everywhere. So Rick Dempsey was there, of course. All the local guys were there, so we had a lot of fun. And
some similar sponsors. I see Frank Kelly and the folks over at Kelly were involved. Adams Jeep, one of our great friends here as well. We've done a lot with them and a lot for leukemia with Adams Jeep and Kelly as well, so big nod to them. And, hey, anywhere Doug DeCinces is the place I want to be. He showed up at my Little League banquet in 1978 over at Eastwood. I still have the picture of that, and Doug loves me, so I love him. So, hey.
I don't want to forget those people. You're right. Just like I said, all our sponsors, we really appreciate the help. We couldn't do it without them.
Well, yeah, the page is coolkidscampaign.org if you want to check it out for Singy's golf tournament next year, last weekend of June up at Hunt Valley. Ken, always great, man. Hey, if anybody sees you around town here in Baltimore, they'll say, hey, that looks like Ken Singleton. He's off this week from the Yes Network. So you watch the games here and enjoy them, and we'll check back in with you in a couple weeks. And who knows, maybe there'll be a Yankee sell-off going on here.
Who knows? I'm sure we'll talk about it, Nestor.
Singy, always appreciate the time. Thanks, bud.
Take care.
There he goes, Ken Singleton, number 29 in your program, number 1 in your hearts. And the website is coolkidscampaign.org. I love reaching out to the Oriole legends who still are doing great things in our community. And Ken still lives in our community up in the Hunt Valley, Timonium area, as well as going back and forth to the Yes Network and doing these Yankee games for the better part of 2 decades now. Luke and I will be covering all things Yankees and Orioles all week long. You can find us out on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, anywhere you are. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.